So, good morning. This will be our recorded session for enterprise architecture modeling guidelines. This will be uploaded in YouTube, and then you are to watch the whole video so that you'll be able to answer the questions that I will be posting for your task performance. By the way, just a reminder, your task performance was extended until Saturday morning. Okay, so please watch this video so that you could answer it. Okay, so let's start. So for this day, we'll have two topics. We'll have the fundamental guidelines in enterprise architecture modeling, and then guidelines for readability and usability of models. So in the previous sessions, we have already started talking about models, and even before this class or this course, meron na kayong idea kung ano yung mga ibig sabihin ng mga models, di ba? Like for example, you have already your basic idea on how to create a basic flowchart, and of course, yung mga ibang diagrams, di ba? So those are considered modeling. So yung pagkakaiba lang nila is that when we do enterprise architecture modeling, we are creating a model not on a standard basis but based on a process of a company. We will have a framework on it, like yung template, but then we really need to adjust it na bagay siya sa business process. Okay? So yung learning objectives natin is tatlo. We have the analyze different modeling guidelines. We are to rationalize the use and effectivity of modeling guidelines. And of course, design a strategic model based on the fundamental guidelines na we will be talking about. So yung pangatlo, hindi natin medyo ma-execute kasi we need tools for that one, and not every one of you has the technical capability. So let's just compromise. Okay? Okay, let's start. So, si Enterprise Architecture Fundamental Guidelines, meron siyang iba't ibang, what do you call this one, guidelines. Diba remember, when we say guidelines, these are our, our guide, diba? Kaya nga sinasabing guidelines. Our guide, our standard, our bearing, kung ano yung gagawin natin to make it the correct one. Okay, so marami silang binigay dito na guidelines. What we just need is that we need to observe them. Okay, more than following them, we need to observe them kasi by what they call this one, by assessment, we already know how to create a model. Yung problema lang natin is that how could we create a correct or follow or create a model based on their, kumbaga, based on their standard. So to comply with that one, meron silang ginawang guidelines. So first one, we need to know first, ano ba yung, when can we say na it's already an enterprise model, okay? So an enterprise model, it has to provide specific answers to business, application, and or technology-related questions. So, yung model na gagawin natin, di ba? I always tell you this one, it will be based on business process. So, make sure na your model, if there will be questions along the way, can answer these questions about business, yung application, tapos yung mga technology related, di ba? And then make a clear distinction between a model and a visualization. So ito na yung ibig sabihin ko kanina. A model is it's a representation of how a business process will be represented in a logical concept. Yung visualization naman, it is a representation based on a particular guidelines or standard or tools, di ba? So, pag visualization kasi, we just intend to provide them with diagrams, tapos not an entirely model talaga. So, hindi siya kompleto pag visualization. Pag model yung gagawin natin, we are really to create and then illustrate the entire business process. Yung sa visualization, meron siyang mga exemptions lang or meron siyang mga ipipick na kung ano lang yung gagawa niya ng visualization or diagrams. Okay? Models must be dynamically designed. Ang ibig sabihin nito is that whenever you create a model, any changes that will happen in the business process, it should be able to adapt. Okay? Yan yung one essential component para maging good model, kumbaga good enterprise architecture model. Pangalawa, you have it here, be economical in models and views. Ano ibig sabihin ng be economical? Ibig sabihin, you don't only your model, your enterprise architecture model should also answer what do you call this one? Should also provide insights on sales, on profit, on inventories, di ba? Hindi lang siya pwede na yung sa business operations lang siya. So, ibig sabihin ng economical, it will touch more on like on the aspects of financial, okay? Pangilan ba to? Give it here. Make concepts and structure recognizable. Okay, there are some models na they would want to have it in one lang, like isang space lang kumbaga. So with that one, they tend to compress it, and then that's a wrong practice. Sometimes when you not sometimes, but the best practice in creating enterprise architecture model is that you create concepts in what they call this one in different perspective, like the perspective of the manager, perspective of those who are running the day-to-day transaction, and then the perspective of the customer, para hindi siya in one area talaga. You can, what they call this one, you can create separate spaces para hindi siya congested, kumbaga. Okay? So, when a model is congested, it's rarely, not rarely, but usually talaga, it's, hindi siya magandang tingnan. It's not recognizable. Okay? And then ito naman, apply real concepts in denoting element in a model. So, yung aside from, in this one is in relation to visualization. Diba usually when we say visualization, we represent them with shapes, objects. But in model, like in enterprise architecture model, for example, if you would want to illustrate a cell phone, diba, you can provide a, what do you call this one, a graphic art or an icon for a cell phone. Okay? So, pwedeng ganun yung gawin natin. Okay? So, real-life concepts para mas madaling maintindihan ng pumabasa ng model or kung sino man yung gagamit ng model. Okay, next one, you have it here. Create consistent models. Anong ibig sabihin nitong create consistent models? So, for example, you are creating enterprise architecture models for businesses like, or businesses who does delivery services. So, ibig sabihin, if someone will commission you on creating another kind of model, pero ibang, what they call this one, pero ibang company naman, you should have a basis and a standard or a template, kumbaga, like, ito yung model pag ginagamit, ito yung model na ginagamit ko if I will create a enterprise architecture model for delivery services. So, you have a standard, kumbaga. Being consistent means also creating a standard. Yan yung isang ano nito. So, what if may customization na gagawin? Yes, you can conduct customization, but yung standard na model is nandyan lang. You can add on it, but you cannot differ or delete something about it. Okay? You have it here. Keep abstraction levels consistent. Ang ibig sabihin nito is that too much, what they call this one, we are to provide important details only that are necessary for those who will read it. So, for example, if there are parts of the model na hindi naman talaga kinakailangan ng perspective ng manager, do not include it because that's irrelevant on his perspective. So, abstraction, di ba, remember in abstraction, in OOP, we encapsulate those what they call it one? Those concepts into one para pag what they call this one, when we try to understand it, we have it like in general, kumbaga, hindi siya specific. Diba? So, keeping abstraction levels consistent means you try to deviate providing too much details on models na irrelevant naman on the perspective of the user. Okay? Ito, yung importante, make models correct, accurate, and complete. How do you do this one? So, to do this one, you need to be really specific in terms of user requirements. Like, you need to know the whole process of the business talaga kasi not knowing any part of it or incompleteness, kumbaga, will result in inaccuracy and of course incompleteness. So to do that one, you need to be very familiar with the business talaga. So sabi here, different concerns should be addressed in different parts of the model or through related models. So ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. If the model is anchored on the business process, pero it will be viewed on the perspective of the customer, yun lang yung dapat makikita niya. Hindi na siya pwedeng makakita ng perspective ng nung mga taong gumagawa talaga ng main operations and transactions. Di ba? You have it here. Select the design viewpoint that matches that matches the established objectives. Ito yung palagi kong sinasabi na may iba't ibang perspective, or yung perspective is equivalent to viewpoints. So for example, yung viewpoint ni manager is for monitoring talaga. Usually the model that is given to the manager is a business model type na for monitoring lang. Okay, like overseer of like he oversees the overall transaction of the company, but not more on the what they call this one, on the level wherein he gets to not confront, but make business with the customer. Okay, let's remember that one. Next one, we also have it here, di ba? Marami siyang guidelines, and then later on I will tell you something. Only include elements that directly contribute to the realization of the modeling objectives. So we have this kind of tendency na when we do modeling, as much as possible, we include everything. Okay? But then not everything is relevant. Okay? So provide only or use only elements which you think are necessary for the model. Along the way naman, how do you identify na these models are relevant or must be included? Usually when you read the model, you would notice na if you will try to what they call this one, explain it in the process based on what you know about their business process, your business model or yung model na na-present mo is parang kulang. You will notice it. Okay? Have it here. Do not be afraid to abandon irrelevant elements that clutter a model, diba? They always tell you, like in this one bitaw, in this guideline, you have this kind of minimalist standard. The more, kumbaga, the less elements you have, the more relevant your model is. Like, the more na okay siya tanawon, kumbaga. And then you have it here. Make a model as self-explanatory as possible. So, pag hindi siya medyo closest to self-explanatory, meron naman tayong part wherein we are to explain. But as much as possible, make your model as simple as possible na even if I don't know the business process, I get to understand how your business works. Okay? Parang ganun siya. Separate internal and external behaviors. So, yun yung sinasabi ko. Usually, internal behaviors are from the company, di ba? And then yung external naman is coming from the outside, from the customers, the market demographic, ganun. And then you have it here, collect feedbacks from various stakeholders. This kind of response from the stakeholders will help you improve models, di ba? And then use enterprise architecture layer and group by phase. Ito yung last talaga, group by phase. Kasi nga, hindi po pwedeng lahat ng models will be congested in just one space. Okay? You can have it on different working spaces para hindi siya medyo congested. Okay, have it here, metamorphical direction in finding relevant elements. So we have inwards. Pag inwards daw, it means na towards internal composition of the elements. It means na pag yung arrow daw is pointing papunta sa elements, for example, a square elements, it means na it tends to receive something from the other elements. Okay? Pag upwards naman, it means na the elements that are supported by it. So it means na pag pa-upward naman, this particular element supports the upward, yung elements above it. Okay? Pag downwards naman, it means dalawa yung explanation pag downward, yung direction ng element. Pag downward daw, it could either be an output or a realization of other elements. Ibig sabihin, you have, kumbaga, kung si inwards is pa-receive siya, si downwards naman is pa-send, kumbaga. Okay? Pag sideways naman, this one towards peer elements with which it cooperates. So, usually sideways na direction is used whenever you do process. Okay? Like elements that pertain to process. Okay? Next, limiting, you have it here. Limiting the visual complexity of a model. Here's how you do it. Reduce the number of concepts in a model. Kasi nga, usually, if you will create a model, most people would have it in general bitaw. So, the more specific it is, the more you reduce the number of concepts in a model. Like, you tend to determine like which one is relevant, which one is irrelevant na dayon. And you also have it here, reduce the number of elements in the model. So as what is mentioned a while ago, if the element is not needed in the process of doing the model, remove it. Okay, do not stress out yourself. And then you have it here, reduce the number of relations depicted in the model. Usually, a model or an element has only 3. Like ito yung directional arrow bitaw. You have 3 or 3. Pero more than that, gali, it's already a complicated relationship. Okay? So make sure na you depict or you illustrate it with 2 or more lang siguro. Kasi more than 3, it's really not a good practice. Like for example, you have a square, and then the square has an arrow on the papuntang upward, papuntang sideward, tapos papuntang downward. Ayan, medyo ano na siya, medyo magulo na siya pag ganun. Okay? So how do you avoid that one? Make sure na you know the concept, 'di ba? Pag alam mo yung concept, alam mo lang na okay, this arrow is only connected to this element, and then it only uses 2. Okay? We have to understand those things. And of course, we have it here. I researched how to pronounce this one, pero magkakaiba-iba sila. Some would say it's Gestalt. Some would say Gestalt. Gestalt sila. Pero I think the correct pronunciation is Gestalt. But Gestalt theory of human perception. So ano ba yung purpose ng human perception natin? This one will help you or guide you on how humans will perceive your model. Like pag alam mo tong mga factors na to, you will tend to adjust the way you create your model. For example, itong proximity. Sa proximity daw, tendency is that humans relate objects that are near to each other. Ibig sabihin, pag malapit yung mga elements with each other, it means they are of the same, it's either the same behavior or the same characteristic or the same criteria. Sa similarity naman, you have it here. Objects that are similar belong together as a unit. So, ibig sabihin, when you use similar objects, diba? When you use similar objects, ibig sabihin nun, humans will perceive it. Okay, they belong on the same group. Okay? Continuity naman. When you use a line, it means you are establishing directions. Okay? So make sure na when you use line, it talks about relationship. Yung sinabi ko kanina. Pag closure naman, you have it here. Usually kasi, when we do modeling, like for example, an arrow, diba? An arrow and a bow. Usually, yung endpoint ng arrow, hindi na sinasali when we do modeling. But, with that one, our brains tend to perceive na, okay, it means na there is this one, we can recognize it as humans. So, there are some elements na hindi na siya kinakailangan talaga i-fully visualize. For example, you will use cell phone for what they call for visualization or for modeling, 'di ba? Pag cellphone, yung ginagawa lang natin is something like this one, 'di ba? For example, this one. Lagay lang tayo ng ganito, like for example ganito, and then you have a screen for this one, and then keypads, 'di ba? We tend to understand. I'm sorry about my drawing, 'di ba? We just create a square ba tawag dito? A square. I'm sorry for my drawings. Then we just create a screen, and then we have what they call this one, lines, and then we just put it here, and then we tend to realize na okay, this one means na ito pala is a cell phone, diba? We don't need to really go over the details about it. Okay. Yung last one naman is common fate. You have it here. People have the tendency to perceive different objects that move or function in a similar manner as a unit. Okay, yung common fate. Yan yung ibig sabihin. The second one, you have it here, representation convention. So, ibig sabihin, these are some of the things that you need to, what do you call this one? You need to remember when you create models. Okay, you have it here. The use of layouts. So, the layout aspects, a diagram include basic pattern, horizontal and vertical alignment, above and then before positioning, symmetry, distance of objects, distribution and density of objects and connectors. So, usually kasi, when we create models, there are already existing diagrams, okay? But then, especially if the business is quite unique, with its type of services they offer. We try to create or customize the diagrams or tools that we have already. So one thing to remember lang is that when we use layouts, we need to know this one, yung alignment talaga. Like for example, if you use elements like a square and then you put it on a column type, like yung from up to down, make sure that they are aligned horizontally vertically na correct, di ba? They have correct alignment, correct margins, kumbaga. And then you have it here, ito yung this one is to avoid congestion, di ba? You have it here, distribution and density objects and connectors. Usually yung mga nakikita kong problema when users or illustrators or system analysts create layout is that they tend to put everything in the middle, where in fact yung workspace is medyo malaki, di ba? So it's a good practice to be aware na medyo malaki pa yung space na pwede nating galawan, okay? And then you have it here, the use of symbols. The shapes of object and the model actually match the intrinsic properties of the real-life object, okay? So the closest representation will always be the best. Like for example, if you would want to represent a scissor, use a scissor, Silby, in your symbols. You can use that one. Another one, the use of colors. It is a visual attribute that is strongly influenced by prior knowledge. It can also increase the appeal of a diagram, but can also lead to contrary effects such as confusion and distraction. So for example, if you are to represent an apple, make sure it's really a red apple, because prior knowledge states na what I know whenever an apple is mentioned is that the color of it is red. So make sure na merong relevance sa mga kulay na paggagamitan ninyo. Okay? And then, sa use of colors naman, make sure na it's not contradicting to the, the company policy, because usually, there are companies who are very strict with the colors. Like for example, the colors that I will only be using should only be blue and yellow because STI uses only blue and yellow. Diba? Meron tayong mga ganyang guidelines din. And then, make sure also to practice yung light text. Dapat yung background niya is dark. Pag light background naman, yung text color naman niya is light. Okay? Light background, dark text. Okay? The use of text. Text suggests proper interpretations, associations, and stimulates thinking. It also speeds up the creation of a proper mental state in modeling while creating a good starting for the line of reasoning. Okay? Usually, ang ibig sabihin nito is that when you use text in creating models is that they are to be used as labels. Yung labels naman is that we tend to use talaga kung ano yung name nila. Like for example, a computer. If yung sa description niya is really a computer, use the word computer, not personal computer, 'di ba? Kasi usually kasi yung what they call this one, system analysts who are very technical would use terms which are not comprehensible on the side of those who are not into system analysis, diba? Like for example, yung instead na you will use yung correct na term, not correct na term, but yung term na medyo mas malapit sa nalalaman ng user is laptop or PC. Yung ginagamit niya na term is end user devices. Although it's correct, but then hindi po siya applicable because mahihirapan po na mag-comprehend or mag-understand yung bumabasa. Like for example, I am looking at the computer and then you are telling me it's an end user device. Kung para sa iyo, it's correct, but then on my end, ako yung user na gagamit or mag-interpret ng model, I will feel like, I think this is wrong. So make sure na you put yourselves on those who will read it after, okay? Yung basics talaga yung fundamentals of creating a model, yung goal talaga niya is that when you create it, other people will understand it. Hindi siya na, okay, other people, I will create it, and then ako lang po yung pwedeng mag-interpret nito. Hindi po ganun, okay? That's why usually, yung practice nga nila ngayon, when you create enterprise architecture models, aside from models, you also provide them with description and sometimes explanation pa. Okay? So make sure when you create enterprise architecture models, make sure it's guided with the user requirements, it's it's aligned with the business process, and of course, yung gagamitin nating elements is appropriate, and of course, hindi siya masyadong magulo. Kasi, 'di ba, based from your experience, if I will hand you a model, like a paper with diagrams, and then kumbaga, yung diagrams is medyo marami, tapos medyo congested, we tend to provide an impression na parang mali ito, 'di ba? So make sure na it's pleasing to the eyes, and then make sure that the model na gagawin mo is yung first impression pa lang kay okay, I will understand this one. I can understand this one. Okay? Just by looking at it, I can understand this one. Kaysa naman doon sa pagbigay pa lang sa'yo ng paper, you would say na medyo nakakalito, 'di ba? So that's it for our discussion today. Again, please don't forget to answer your task performance. I'm giving you an extension of the deadline, and please submit it before or on time. Okay? Thank you so much. See you next week, students.